Welcome to this Apache Tomcat webinar, which is going to cover TLS key and certificate generation. The agenda for this webinar is I'll do a quick introduction, followed by an overview of the tools I'm going to be using whilst demonstrating the generation of the keys. There's a script I'll be using for various commands as we go along, and I'll let you know where to find a copy of that. And then we'll do a walkthrough where we actually create keys and certificates for OpenSSL for API native and with keytool for BIO, NIO, and NIO2. Obviously, if you're working with Tomcat 9, then you've also got the option of using the Java key stores with OpenSSL as well, but we're not going to cover that today. If we have any questions as we're going along, please do enter them into the chat window. I'll try and keep an eye on it as we're going through the presentation, but I will come back to it at the end and make sure that any questions, and in fact all questions, have been answered. So, quick introductions then. My name is Mark Thomas. I'm a committer on the Apache Tomcat project. You'll find me posting on various Tomcat mailing lists under markt@apache.org. I'm currently the Tomcat 8 and Tomcat 9 release manager. I do other bits and pieces on Tomcat and around the ASF as well. I also contribute to a number of the expert groups that write the specifications that Tomcat then implements. My day job is as a consultant software engineer at Pivotal, where they essentially just leave me to get on with working on Tomcat. My current focus is on the development of Tomcat 9. So the tools I'm going to be using today, most of I'm going to be using OpenSSL. I'm using 101E, which is the latest stable binary. You can download it via the OpenSSL website. It's included in the Windows binaries downloads for the Tomcat native connector. And if you're on a Linux platform, it's probably installed on your operating system already. OpenSSL for certificate generation, and particularly when it's acting as a CA, needs some configuration. I'm just using the default configuration which I've grabbed from GitHub. For the Java key store work, I'll be using keytool, and that's packaged with JREs and JDKs. Finally, the script that has got all of the commands in it that I'm going to be using during this presentation, you can find at home.apache.org. You can either grab a copy of that now and follow along, or review it along with the recording of the presentation later. There will be, well, this presentation is being recorded and it will be made available by YouTube probably sometime tomorrow. So, the walkthrough then. Right, let's swap over to the good old command prompt. All I've got here is an empty directory called demo on the D drive, in which I've placed a development build of Apache Tomcat. So we've got a Tomcat instance we can use to test the certificates we create, a copy of OpenSSL, and that configuration file that I've downloaded from GitHub. Now, what I'm going to be doing in this demonstration is I'm also going to be creating my own local certificate authority. Now, that's not something you would always need to do. It can sometimes be useful in testing if you want to test how Tomcat or your clients or some other component of your system behaves with different certificate signing configurations, with certificate revocation lists, and the sorts of things that you actually need a certificate authority to do. If you're just generating production certificates where you're going to go off to a third party like DigiCert or Semantic, then you only need to worry about the key generation and importing the responses. But I'll actually show you the end-to-end process in this demonstration. So, to start this off, we need to create a bit of a directory structure. So, this is where I start copying stuff from the script. We'll create a directory to put our certificate authority into, and then underneath that, we'll have one directory for the new certificates, one for the private keys, one for the certificate signing requests, and one for our Java key stores. OpenSSL needs a file to track certificate serial numbers, so we'll create that file and just stick 1000 in there. It's actually not 1000, that's hexadecimal, but we don't really need to worry about that too much. And OpenSSL also needs a completely empty file called index.txt, which will become our certificate database. So having put the directory structure in place, we need to create our certificate authority. And that's as simple as doing that. Right, I need a passphrase. All my passphrases, I'm just going to use change it. Obviously, in production, you might want to use, oops, if I actually type it properly, you will want to use something a little bit more secure, but for this demonstration, I just want to use something I can remember. So our certificate authority, this is a Tomcat demonstration, so we'll say we're in the US, and we're in Maryland, which is technically where the ASF is based. No locality, organization name, ASF, no organizational unit, and we'll call this the Tomcat Demo CA. Oops, CA. No email address, there we go, and that's created a certificate authority. Obviously, the likes of Semantic and DigiCert need to put in a huge amount of security around the private key that we've just created. Obviously, for our test environment, we don't need to worry too much about that. Okay, so now this is something that you would want to do as a user, whether you were creating your own local certificate authority or not, and this is creating the private key and the certificate signing request. So the command to do that looks like this. Again, I'm just using all defaults, so that's going to generate us a 2048-bit RSA private key, and we need to provide the identifying information. So again, I'm going to say I'm in the US, I'm in Maryland, no locality, organization name ASF, and I'm going to put an organizational unit name in here. This is because I want to create multiple certificates for the same host name, and each certificate needs to have a unique distinguished name, and the easiest way of doing that is just tweaking the organizational unit name. So I'm just going to stick an A in there. My fully qualified domain name, well in this case, because I'm going to be doing my tests on localhost, then I need to use localhost. That would be tomcat.apache.org, yourcompany.com, whatever your fully qualified domain name is, that's the bit that needs to go there. But for this demonstration, obviously, it's going to be localhost. No email address, no Chinese password, no optional company name. And that's it. So that's created the private key. So if we go and have a look in our demo CA, in private, we can see we've got our localhost key. We've also got our CA key that was created in the same place. And if we go and have a look in our certificate signing requests, we have our certificate signing request. Now, that's the file whose contents you would normally paste into the Semantic, the DigiCert, the whoever's website in order to get your certificate. So now we're going to change hats and go back to being the certificate authority, and we're going to sign that request. And that's the command to do it there. Enter the passphrase, change it. Right, check that looks okay. US, Maryland, ASF, a local host, not a CA. Yep, looks good. We're happy, we're going to sign that, and we're going to commit it. Right, and then what gets created, which is what would normally get passed back to you as an end user from a certificate authority, is in the new certs directory, and that's our localhost certificate. There's something else a certificate authority will normally tell you need is the certificate chain file. And in this example, that's just the certificate authority certificate, which should be in the root of demo CA. Yes, CA cert. But your certificate authority will always tell you which file you need for your particular certificate. So once you've got that, then you need to install them in your Tomcat instance. So let's just do that. Rather than mess about with copy commands, I'm going to do it the easy graphical way. So first of all, I need my key. So I'm going to go and put that in my Tomcat configuration directory. Oh, look, there's one I did earlier. Let's just delete all of that. Pretend you didn't see it. Right, cleaned all that out. Right, let's try that again. paste. So that's our localhost key that we've just created. Go back, and I need our certificate. That's in new cert, localhost certificate, demo conf localhost certificate, and we need the certificate chain, which is just the CA certificate, and pop that into the conf directory as well. Now we need to set up our connector to use those. So we go and edit server.xml. So we edit that with Notepad 2. Scroll down, and this is Tomcat 9. So there's a fairly reasonable starting point already set up for me. And I suspect because this is the file I was editing this morning, it's actually all completely set up. Let's just check that. The key file is localhost key.pem. Yes. Certificate file, localhost cert. Certificate chain file, ca cert.pem. Excellent. That's all set up. So let's go and see what that looks like. So start up my Tomcat instance. And what we're looking for is a connector starting. Oops, that doesn't look good. Let's scroll up. What went wrong? Yes, somebody didn't clean out his configuration file properly from this morning's demonstration. Let me go and fix that. Open with Notepad 2. I think I'd left an, yes, I'd left an NIO connector. All right, let's try that again. What went wrong there? Right, let's try that. Okay. See if we can do that without the stack trace this time. The joys of live demonstrations. It always goes wrong no matter how many times you rehearse it. Okay, so here's the bit that we're really interested in here. It tells us that our protocol handler for HTTPS APR 8443 started. That looks promising. So if we bring up a browser and we go to HTTPS, there we go. Right, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to complain bitterly because the certificate is signed by a CA that's not trusted. So I'm going to say, yes, I really know what I'm doing. It is okay, honest. Also, you wouldn't want your end users to do this, which is why you don't normally use self-signed certificates in production. Not only do the users get nasty error messages, the users have no way of knowing whether or not they're being subjected to a man-in-the-middle attack. So in production, obviously, you need to use production certificates from commercial CAs. There are some that will offer certificates for free, but their root certificate authorities are trusted by the browsers, so none of those error messages appear, and you don't get this horrible red line or equivalent for your browser of choice. If you're going to have a look at what we've actually got here, we're going to look at the certificate information. Then we've got our localhost certificate that's been signed by Tomcat Demo CA, and we get the little explanation of the error message down here that our CA isn't a trusted root. But if we go back to the certificate, then it's been issued by Tomcat Demo CA, and it's been issued to localhost. So that's the certificate that we created up and running in Tomcat. So let's just minimize that, so we're back to that. Stop Tomcat. So let's just go back to demo and clear the screen as well. So that was a pure OpenSSL certificate for use with the APR native connector. Let's look at what doing the equivalent to create a Java key store looks like. So first of all, just going to set up the path to put keytool on my path because it's not there by default. That should have done that. And then the first step is to create the private key. Now, for those of you that have used keytool, you might be used to entering the distinguished name in its components parts via prompts. The problem with that is that if you want one of those component parts to be completely blank, keytool won't let you. It's got to have something in it. Or it leaves it as unknown. So I actually don't want anything at all in the locality. So by explicitly setting the distinguished name on the command line, I can have exactly the distinguished name I want. And you'll notice that I've used OU equals B to give this certificate a different distinguished name from the certificate I created for the APR native connector. If I didn't do that, when I tried to sign it with OpenSSL, it would complain that it was a duplicate certificate. Right, key store password, let's just change it again. Yeah, and that's my private key created. I need to create the certificate signing request in a separate step. So again, these two steps are things you would do as an end user if you're going to send off this signing request to a commercial provider. And yet again, I can't type the password. There we go. So that's created the signing request. And if we look in demo CA signing requests, there's our second signing request. Now we're changing hats again and becoming a certificate authority. So I try and sign that certificate. And it all goes horribly wrong. And it says the state or province name field needed to be the same in the CA certificate, MD for Maryland, and the request, MD, Maryland. They are the same. And you can bang your head against a brick wall for hours trying to figure out what's going wrong here. And the problem is that as far as OpenSSL is concerned, that is MD encoded using UTF-8, and as far as the Java keytool is concerned, that is MD encoded using printable string. Now, for those of you familiar with how those encodings work, you'll know that the bytes are actually byte for byte identical. However, the problem is not the actual bytes of the MD, but it's the byte that goes just before it that tells you what the encoding is. Because the encodings are different, even though the resultant bytes are the same, OpenSSL is saying, no, they're actually not the same, and I'm configured to require that they match, so I'm not going to sign that. And if you're running a test CA, the easiest way around that problem is to use the policy anything policy, which basically says, yeah, I don't care that they're different, just sign it and stop moaning. There we go. USMD ASF organization unit B, good localhost, sign the certificate and pop it in the store. Excellent. So once we've done that, our CA will have generated the certificate. So if we go and have a look in demo CA new certs. There we go. We've got our localhost 2 cert. That's what's been generated by the CA, and that's what will be sent back to you, along with probably a link to the certificate chain, which you would then need to import into your key store. So we actually need to import the key chain first. So let's do that. Remember, the key chain in our case is just the CA certificate. So we'll do that. And keytool says, are you sure you really want to trust this? Yes, it's the Tomcat demo CA. Yes, I know what I'm doing. Trust it. We've added it. And once we've imported that, then we can import our signed certificate. There you go. And it recognizes that it's a reply in that it's attached to the private key that we created previously. If I can remember my keytool commands, whoops, keytool list, that's minus list, isn't it? Minus list, minus V for verbose, minus key store, whoops, key store. This is why I've been copying and pasting it. Demo CA, key stores, there we go. That will list all the certificates that are in the store. So 2 entries we can see, just scrolling past. And the last one I think will be the Tomcat one. Yeah, it starts here just below all these asterisks. Alias Tomcat, owner localhost, issuer, Tomcat demo CA. Yeah, that all looks good. All properly signed. Excellent. So what we need to do now is get that copied across to our Tomcat instance so we can use it. So let's take our key store, demo, conf, pop it in the conf directory, and go and edit server.xml. Right. Now remember to comment out the APR native connector because we don't want to be running both of those in parallel. And then let's uncomment the NIO one and check it's using the right certificate key store file, conf localhost to, yes. Yeah, if you use relative paths here, it's always relative to Catalina base. You don't have to put your key stores in the conf directory, but it seems like the natural place to put them to me. Right, so that's looking good. Let's start it up and see if it works. cd Apache Tomcat bin run. So this time we'll be looking for an HTTPS NIO connector to start on 8443, and I think I saw one scroll past. Yes, there we are, HTTPS NIO 8443. That looks good. Let's just refresh this, and we should get the warning again. And we skip past the horrible warnings because we know what we're doing. And just to confirm that the certificate is as we expect, we go and look at it. Again, it's issued to localhost from Tomcat Demo CA. If we look back at the details and we look at the subject, and then you'll see the organizational unit B. So this is definitely the second certificate that we requested. So that's shown you setting up a certificate with OpenSSL and the commands you need to do it. They will stay on home.apache.org for, well, basically as long as the server's up, to be honest. Once that sort of stuff's up there, I tend to leave it there. So it's always going to be available for people to refer back to. Obviously, going through all of that, I've largely used defaults. There are lots of configuration options that you can use. You can have larger keys. You can have different types of certificates. I would recommend having a look at the various manuals for keytool and for OpenSSL for how to do that. But what you've got here is a starting point that is known to work that you can then tweak to adjust to your particular use case. And hopefully by having it being able to start from a known good working starting point, that will make it a little bit easier to deal with the inevitable snags that seem to crop up whenever you try and create a certificate. So that brings us to the end of what I wanted to talk about today. Let's just pop back to the presentation. And now it's time for questions. Okay, it doesn't look like any questions are coming in. So thank you very much to everybody that attended the webinar. Your time is much appreciated. I hope you found it useful. The recording will be available on YouTube hopefully sometime tomorrow. Thank you all very much.